Hello and welcome back to Rev Endurance Sports, and today we're going to do a bike profile on this super cool bike for an 11-year-old young man who is racing in the California State Championships in triathlon. So this is a pretty disciplined young man, and it's funny because I mentioned it to Jess, and I said, "Wow, this young man is, really committed to this." And she says, "Well, I was also a competitive swimmer in my younger years, and it's less equipment to consider, but yeah, I guess kids get into competitive soccer and competitive baseball and all these other sports. It just shocked me a little bit being triathlon because it is so equipment intensive of a sport for a young man. However, this bike came in for its first service. The bike was new in January, and we're in October now. And the gentleman said, "Listen, my son has got this event coming up October the 12th. So can you take a look at it and do whatever needs to get done?" All right. So a couple of things that it came in for. The rear tire, the valve was kind of stuck. Well, that's fine because it was clogged up with sealant. And I know some of you have talked about click valves, and I'll eventually do an unboxing on the click valves because they finally came back into stock. So yeah, there was sealant clogging up that valve. So that was the most obvious thing. But then I put the bike in the stand, and the chain had a lot of slack and little. Now, I know that for sizing purposes, that's not where Shimano recommends it. Shimano recommends it in your big chain ring and your big cog. But it's just one of the things that I like to check when I am evaluating someone else's bike build. So the chain had a lot of slack in the little combination. And then I started shifting through the gears, and he couldn't actually get into this final top cog. Now, an interesting thing to talk about here is that when it comes to triathlon, I guess juniors can race whatever gearing they want. So they don't have any rollout restrictions. And it's pretty funny that in pro cycling, in the adult cycling, they're trying to do some rollout gear restrictions. And of course, SRAM has a lawsuit with the UCI saying, hey, the gearing restriction that you want, 5411, which is what the Shimano Drivetrain has as a top gear. We don't have that, and so whatever the lawsuit is. So anyway, that's another topic for another day. Right, so in this case, this young man, can race a full cassette, and I believe that's an 1134, and then up here, he has a 4832 chain ring combination. Now, what the gentleman told me is that when he purchased this bike, it actually came as a 1x setup, but he wanted a 2x setup. And of course, it makes sense here in San Diego. We have very, very hilly terrain, and so it makes a lot of sense to have a 2x setup here. He is 11 years old. Over time, he'll continue to gain some leg strength. Maybe at some point he can go back to a 1x setup, but for now, it makes sense. This is pretty much just a quick look from the front door of my shop and along the side of my building. So we just have a lot of hills, and they're very, very steep too. Double digits, 15, 20, 25%. Let's go over the spec though, because I think this is a really, really well spec'd out bike, as you can tell. So right here, we've got this Microshift Centos 11. Hopefully that comes into focus. And this has the same type of, let's say, paddle shifting system that you would have with Campagnolo. So you'd have this to go to bigger cogs and the thumb shifter here to go down to smaller cogs in the cassette. Now, I really like this brake hood. Just the shape of it, I mean, it's just got a really nice flat shape to it, and I think that would be really comfortable. It's a little tall up here, but that's okay. I mean, you can get by that. If you remember, the old SRAM shifters were really short here on the mechanical side, but this is quite tall, and that's okay. But it shifts really well. And then the front derailleur is the same kind of setup here. So you have the thumb shifter to drop down, and then the paddle to go into the big ring. So you'll have plenty of leverage here, and it just shifts really well. And don't forget to check out that there's some Silca bar tape here. I mean, this bike is really well spec'd out. So we have that. And then look at this Envy saddle. So we got an Envy saddle with a cutout. The saddle has a little bit of a nose attitude to it. So I will ask the father if he knows or if his son has been to a fitter and why his saddle is nose up. In a video a long time ago, there was David Author's mechanic. He says he just fixes the saddle when he sees that they're nose up or nose down. And I'm like, you don't do that. You don't mess with someone's bike fit. They may not know that it's nose up, and you might be helping them by flattening out the saddle, but in most cases, leave it alone and first have the conversation with the customer. So as to why the saddle is where it is, whether it be height or fore and aft or saddle tilt, just have the conversation with the customer first, and then say something to the effect of, take me through the discussion you had with your bike fitter when you got this saddle set up. And most times they'll say, oh, I've never had a bike fit. And there's an open opportunity for you to say, I am a bike fitter. Would you like to schedule a bike fit? Or if they've had a bike fit, then you say, would you like a second opinion on your bike fit? Let's take a look and see what's going on with how you are set up. And that is usually a situation where the customer is very open and receptive. Now, let's go back to the setup here. I had never heard of this Crankset before, and that's okay. I mean, there's probably many aftermarket brands out there, but it's got a 110 BCD, so a lot of chain rings are pretty standard now, standardized to a 110 BCD. Of course, Campagnolo does their own weird thing from time to time, and certain chain rings are not compatible with, let's say, Chorus or Records, but this is 110 BCD. Now, a couple of things that I found interesting about this. He's got a set of Dura-Ace pedals, which is really cool. And then another thing that I found interesting was this bolt. And I say bolt because there's only one. It only has one pinch bolt. Additionally, the torque value for the nut that goes through here, the bolt that goes through here to secure the crankset, 60 to 65 Newton meters. And I thought that was really high. I had not seen something that high before. So 60 to 65 Newton meters. And then this bolt is only 7 Newton meters. Now, we're into this video, 9-10 minutes or so. I wish to provide a PCA announcement right now. If you ride a crankset that has one of these dials here for preload, and preload just basically means we want to get the bearings nice and snug so that there's no play in the crankset moving back and forth in the frame. I do a lot of Praxis cranksets installations, and they have that dial as well. This is not set it and forget it. So please, if you have one of these cranksets that has one of these, go out to your bike right now and just move the see if you can move the crankset from side to side. If you can move the crankset from side to side, then won't be able to show you because I've got the bike parked just perfectly. But there's a little set. Oh, and this is something else I did like about this. This was a 3mm bolt here, because normally they're 2mm, and they're just so it might have been 2.5, but I know it was not a 2mm, and they usually strip out, so that's another problem with these things. But the torque value is supposed to be very, very light. Anyway, loosen this up, go in the tightening direction to take out the plate, or vice versa. I've had cranksets come in here where this preload is on so tight that it's restricting the flow of the crankset. So take the chain off of the chain rings, spin the crankset, make sure there is nothing binding, you're not pressing the bearings together. And as I mentioned just a second ago, also you're checking for lateral movement side to side. So you want to ensure that the crankset is set properly, and then you tighten down that preload ring. All right, continuing on. This is a mechanical disc brake bike with TRP brakes. Now this is really cool because it's just so easy to adjust at home. You've got the pad adjustments right here with the 3mm Allen wrench, and you can take up the slack on the cable right here. If you're traveling, you don't have to worry about hydraulic fluid bleeding. You don't have to worry about how you hang your bike. There is a urban myth or wives' tale out there that if you hang your bike upside down, you introduce air into the system. So that's not always the case. And then also in the rear, just the bolts are right there. So easy access to it for your pad adjustment. And you can take up the tension on your cable with this barrel adjuster right here. There you go. Now also, if we're back here looking at this wheel, this is a Vision wheel set. And I don't know the rim depth, but it looks to be at least 58 or 60. Now, what I found interesting about this is the lacing pattern. So you have these two spokes coming over here, and maybe let's back up a little bit. Generally what you have is one spoke pulling from the drive side, one spoke pulling from the non-drive side, alternating back and forth throughout the whole frame. The whole rim. But this one is not like that. So for example, this spoke is drive side, non-drive side, drive side again. Then a non-drive side, drive side, then non-drive side. Drive side, non-drive side, right? So you can see the pattern there. So that's a little bit different than most wheels. If we look at the front wheel, drive side, non-drive side, non-drive side. And then drive side, non-drive side, non-drive side, drive side. So it's just the opposite. On this one you get paired drive side spokes, and on the front wheel you get paired non-drive side spokes, which is where the rotor for the disc brake system is. So I don't know, I guess it works. Oh, there's the marking on it. So it is a 60 millimeter rim depth, which for an 11-year-old 85-pound young man, this might be quite the handle, or quite the bike to handle in some crosswinds. As I mentioned, he's only 11 years old, so rider skill and rider strength might be an issue, but he's fine, he says, or his father says. All right, another thing, I was just kind of cleaning up some things. The pigtails on the derailleurs were super, super long. And you can't really tell from this, but when this is on, like let's say the front derailleur, it was literally like way out here. And so that's quite a pigtail. Another thing I noticed is you can tell that this bike has been propped upside down, maybe to do a flat repair or something to that effect. You can see the scraping on the hoods and on the brake. I don't know what you'd call this, but this shifter body and then the brake hood. And then here again, the shifter body and then the brake hood. I don't think I covered this, but these are 150 millimeter crank arms. And I'm sorry I can't get that to focus. There you go. 150 millimeter crank arms. So that's really good for this young man. Also, I don't think I covered it, but the chain is a pre-waxed chain from Soka. So, I mean, this kid's got it all going on. He's running Continental 5000 tubeless in, with Soka sealant, and he's got a wax chain. I mean, this kid has got it all, and it's so cool to see. Now let's go over just a few methodology things that I do here in the bike shop. To me, it makes a lot of sense to have these tools at home. So this is a 4 Newton meter torque wrench, a 5 Newton meter torque wrench from Ritchie, and it comes with all the associated common bits. And I like to use this in front of the customer because it gives them the confidence and security that something's been torqued properly. And it's a very simple tool. There's no adjustments to make. It's always 4 Newton meters and it's always 5 Newton meters. And then this I use to check rotors. And it has the most common rotor measurements for Shimano, SRAM, TRP, whatever. And then also, I always keep a flat, and just my own thing, I keep a flat one, a flat spoke, so that when I need to check the sealant in someone's tire, I run that through the valve. So let's imagine that that's at 6 o'clock. I poke at it, I pull it out, just like a dipstick method on your car. Sorry if that's not focused in, but I check the level of the sealant, and then I also check the consistency of the sealant. And what you want to make sure is that you still have your sealant in a liquid form. And I know that sounds obvious, but what happens is the sealant will dry on the inside of the tire, and then all you're left with is the water carrier or whatever they're using. So you want to make sure that when you actually touch and feel the sealant, that you can feel more than just water. All right. So in the end, the shifting got all squared away. The bead tension adjustment took care of the excess slack, because when this was in the climbing cog, the top cog of this derailleur was literally right underneath and almost touching that. I believe it's a 34. Actually, it's a 32. So it was hitting this 32 climbing cog. So there was just no way that was set properly. So I don't know who did the initial build, but that's not important. You just run through the whole bike when it's in your stand, because you're the last professional, paid for person to work on the bike. And so everything, especially for an 11-year-old, has to be perfect. You have to make sure the wheels are torqued properly. You want to make sure the crankset is torqued properly. Everything, the saddle, everything, because we can assume that this gentleman may not be able to fix whatever's going on and get back into race mode. He may not even be carrying any tools. Doesn't look like anything's on there. but also just for the safety reasons, to make sure that the bike is perfect. I have the liability to ensure that this bike is safe, but this being a performance bike, we also want this gentleman to win the state championships, and then that's a good little crowning achievement for my shop as well. All right, well, that is all for today. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you up the road.